Colomber by Dino Bazzotti, translated by Lawrence Venuti. When Stefano Roy was 12 years old, he asked his father, a sea captain and the owner of a fine sailing ship, to take him on board as his birthday gift. "When I grow up," the boy said, "I want to go to sea with you, and I shall command ships even more beautiful and bigger than yours." "God bless you, my son," the father answered. And since his vessel had to leave that very day, he took the boy with him. It was a splendid sunny day, and the sea was calm. Stefano, who had never been on a ship, happily wandered around on deck, admiring the complicated maneuvers of the sails. He asked the sailors about this and that, and they gladly explained everything to him. When the boy had gone astern, he stopped, his curiosity aroused, to observe something that intermittently rose to the surface at a distance of 200 to 300 meters, in line with the ship's wake. Although the ship was indeed moving fast, carried by a great quarter wind, that thing always maintained the same distance, and though the boy did not make out what it was, there was some indefinable air about it which attracted him intensely. No longer seeing Stefano on deck, the father came down from the bridge after having shouted his name in vain and went to look for him. "Stefano, what are you doing there, standing so still?" the captain asked his son, finally perceiving him on the stern as he stared at the waves. "Papa, come here and see." The father came, and he too looked in the direction indicated by the boy, but he could not see anything. "There's a dark thing that rises in the wake every so often," Stefano said, "and it follows behind us." "Despite my 40 years," said the father, "I believe I still have good eyesight, but I see absolutely nothing." The boy insisted. The father went to get a telescope, and he scrutinized the surface of the sea in line with the wake. Stefano saw him turn pale. "What is it? Why do you make that face?" "Oh, I wish I had never listened to you," the captain exclaimed. "Now I'm worried about you. What you see rising from the water and following us is not some object. That is a columber. It's the fish that sailors fear above all others in every sea in the world. It is a tremendous, mysterious shark, more clever than man. For reasons that perhaps no one will ever know, it chooses its victim, and when it has chosen, it pursues him for years and years, for his entire life, until it has succeeded in devouring him. And the strange thing is this: no one can see the Colomber except the victim himself and his blood relations." "It's not a story?" "No, I have never seen it, but from descriptions I have heard many times, I immediately recognized it. That bison-like muzzle, that mouth continually opening and closing, those terrible teeth. Stefano, there's no doubt the Colomber has ominously chosen you, and as long as you go to sea, it will give you no peace. Listen to me. We are going back to land now, immediately. You will go ashore and never leave it again, not for any reason whatsoever. You must promise me you won't. Seafaring is not for you, my son. You must resign yourself. After all, you will be able to make your fortune on land, too." Having said this, he immediately reversed his course, re-entered the port, and on the pretext of a sudden illness, he put his son ashore, then left again without him. Deeply troubled, the boy remained on the shore until the last tip of the mast sank behind the horizon. Beyond the pier that bounded the port, the seas was completely deserted. But looking carefully, Stefano could perceive a small black point which intermittently surfaced on the water. It was his Colomber, slowly moving back and forth, obstinately waiting for him. From then on, with every expedient, the boy was dissuaded from his desire to go to sea. His father sent him to study in an inland city, hundreds of kilometers away. And for some time, distracted by his surroundings, Stefano no longer thought about the sea monster. Still, he returned home for summer vacations, and the first thing he did, as soon as he had some free time, was hurry to the end of the pier for a kind of verification, although he fundamentally considered it unnecessary. After so many years, even supposing that all the stories his father told him were true, the Colomber had certainly given up its siege. But Stefano stood there, astonished, his heart pounding. At a distance of 200 to 300 meters from the pier, in the open sea, the sinister fish was moving back and forth slowly, raising its muzzle from the water every now and then and turning toward land as it anxiously waited for whether Stefano was coming at last. So the idea of that hostile creature waiting for him day and night became a secret obsession for Stefano. And even in the distant city, it cropped up to wake him with worry in the middle of the night. He was safe, of course. Hundreds of kilometers separated him from the Colomber. And yet, he knew that beyond the mountains, beyond the forests and the plains, the shark was waiting for him. He might have moved even to the most remote continent, and still the Colomber would have appeared in the mirror of the nearest sea with the inexorable obstinacy of a fatal instrument. Stefano was a serious and eager boy, profitably continued his studies, and as soon as he was a man, he found a dignified and well-paying position at the store in the inland city. Meanwhile, his father died through illness, his magnificent ship was sold by his widow, and his son found himself the heir to a modest fortune. Work, friends, diversions, first love affairs. Stefano's life was not well underway. The thought of the Columber nonetheless tormented him like a mirage that was fatal and fascinating at the same time. And as the days passed, rather than disappear, it seemed to become more insistent. Great are the satisfactions of an industrious, well-to-do, and quiet life, but greater still is the attraction of the abyss. Stefano was hardly 22 years old when, having said goodbye to his inland friends and resigned from his job, he returned to his native city and told his mother of his firm intention to follow his father's trade. The woman, whom Stefano had never mentioned the mysterious shark, joyfully welcomed his decision. To have her son abandon the sea for the city had always seemed to her, in her heart, a betrayal of the family's tradition. Stefano began to sail, giving proof of his seaworthiness, his resistance to fatigue, and his intrepid spirit. He sailed, and in the wake of his ship, day and night, in good weather and in storms, the Columber trudged along. He knew that this was his curse and his penalty, and precisely for this reason, perhaps, he did not find the strength to sever himself from it, and no one on board except him perceived the monster. "Don't you see anything over there?" he asked his companions from time to time, pointing at the wake. "No, we don't see anything at all. Why?" "I don't know. It seemed to me you didn't see a Colomber by any chance, did you?" the sailors asked, laughing and touching wood. "Why are you laughing? Why are you touching wood?" "Because the Colomber is an animal that spares no one, and if it has begun to follow this ship, It means that one of us is doomed. Stefano did not slacken. The uninterrupted threat that followed on his heels seemed in fact to strengthen his will, his passion for the sea, his courage in times of strife and danger. When he felt that he was master of his trade, he used his modest inheritance to acquire a small steam freighter with a partner. Then he became the sole proprietor of it, and thanks to a series of successful shipments, he could subsequently buy a true merchantman, setting out with always more ambitious aims. But the successes and the millions were unable to remove that continual torment from his soul, nor did he ever try, on the other hand, to sell the ship and retire to undertake different enterprises on land. To sail and sail was his only thought. Just as soon as he set foot on land in some port after a long journey, the impatience to depart again immediately pricked him. He knew that outside the Colomber was waiting for him, and that the Colomber was synonymous with ruin, with nothingness. An indomitable impulse dragged him without rest from one ocean to another. Until one day Stefano suddenly realized that he had grown old, very old, and no one around him could explain why, rich as he was, he did not finally leave the cursed life of the sea. He was old and bitterly unhappy because his entire existence had been spent in that mad flight across the seas to escape his enemy. But the temptation of the abyss had always been greater for him than the joys of a prosperous and quiet life. One evening, while his magnificent ship was anchored offshore the port where he was born, he felt close to death. He then called his second officer, in whom he had great trust, and ordered him not to oppose what he was about to do. The other man promised on his honor. Having gotten his assurance, Stefano revealed to the second officer the story of the Colomber that had continued to pursue him uselessly for nearly 50 years. The officer listened to him frightened. It has escorted me from one end of the world to the other, Stefano said, with a faithfulness that not even the noblest friend could have shown. Now I am about to die. The Colomber, too, will be terribly old and weary by now. I did not betray it. Having said this, he took his leave of the crew, ordered a small boat to be lowered into the sea, and boarded it, after he made them give him a harpoon. Now I am going to meet it, he announced. It isn't right to be disappointed, but I shall struggle with all my might. With a few weary strokes of the oars, he drew away from the side of the ship. Officers and sailors saw him disappear down below on the placid sea, shrouded in the nocturnal shadows. The sky was a crescent moon. He did not have to work very hard. Suddenly, the Colomber's horrible snout emerged at the side of the boat. Here I am with you, finally, Stefano said. Now it's just the two of us. And gathering his remaining strength, he raised the harpoon to strike. Ah, the Colomber groaned imploringly. What a journey it's taken to find you. I, too, am wasted with fatigue. How much you made me swim, and you kept on fleeing. You never understood at all.